The moment Eleanor Whitmore opened the library door, the sound of shattering glass tore through the quiet, and a guttural groan made her stomach knot with dread. She had always believed her life in Silver Creek was shielded by wealth and propriety, a careful balance of social gatherings, elegant gowns, and polite conversation. But as her eyes adjusted to the dim afternoon light, she realized that nothing, no fortune, no lineage could have prepared her for what lay sprawled across her Persian rug. A man, lean yet muscular, with long black hair cascading down his shoulders, lay on his side, one arm twisted awkwardly beneath him. Blood seeped from a deep gash on his forearm, dark against the bright threads of the rug. Beads and a single eagle feather threaded into his hair glimmered faintly in the sunlight streaming through the torn window, and the edges of his long leather coat were caked with mud and snow remnants. Eleanor's first instinct was to scream, to summon help, but something in his stormy gray eyes froze her in place. They were sharp, wary, and alive with a raw intelligence that seemed to pierce right through her carefully constructed world. I didn't touch anything," Eleanor stammered, her voice shaky, gloved hands instinctively gripping the edge of the mahogany door frame. "I did not say you did," the man replied, his voice low, steady, yet carrying a tension that made her pulse race. "I only said, it's dangerous here." The room smelled of iron and earth, faintly metallic from the wound, mixed with the smoke of smoldering logs from the fireplace. Eleanor noticed the jagged edges of the window, curtains shredded in the chaotic entry. Someone had followed him, and the chase had ended here, inside her library. Her heart pounded not only with fear but an unexplainable curiosity, a pull toward this enigmatic stranger. Who are you?" she asked, inching closer despite the warning in his gaze. "Nantan," he said simply, pressing his bloodied hand against the rug as if testing his grip on life itself. "And I've been followed. They can't catch me if I rest, even for a moment." "Followed?" Eleanor echoed, her mind spinning. She had lived in Silver Creek her whole life and knew of thefts, rivalries, and duels, but nothing like this. A part of her wanted to flee to the safety of her servants and the mansion's thick walls. Another part, one she rarely acknowledged, leaned closer, compelled by the danger radiating from him. Eleanor's practical instincts overrode her fear. She fetched a damp cloth from the washroom and pressed it against his forearm, trying to stem the bleeding. "How dare you touch me?" Nantan suddenly exclaimed, his gray eyes flashing with a mix of anger and surprise. I'm just trying to help," Eleanor said, startled yet firm. "You're bleeding. You could die if we don't stop it." For the briefest moment, the tension in his face softened, revealing vulnerability beneath the hard exterior. Then his gaze hardened once more. "Fine. Help me. But know this: my life is not a trinket for your comforts." Hours passed in tense silence. Eleanor worked with deliberate care, cleaning the wound, wrapping it with strips torn from a nearby curtain when no bandages were at hand. She noticed every detail, the slight tremor of his hands, the way his breathing caught as he shifted, the tribal symbols stitched into his coat, a language she didn't understand but felt deeply. Nantan, for his part, observed her with the same intensity he projected in everything else, his eyes flitting over her gloves, her hair, the nervous way she perched on the edge of a chair. "I should leave before they come back," he murmured, voice rough but thoughtful. "You can't leave now," Eleanor replied, surprising even herself with the steadiness in her tone. "You're hurt. If they find you outside—" Her words trailed off. Even she knew what would happen. He studied her as though weighing her courage against her social rank. Finally, he nodded, a gesture both reluctant and grateful. "Then I stay. For now." The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows across the room, painting the shelves of leather-bound books with gold and amber. Eleanor watched him quietly, realizing how little she knew of the world beyond Silver Creek. He spoke little at first. Fragments of his life seeping into the room, tales of Apache lands, of distant skirmishes, of debts owed to dangerous men who tracked him relentlessly. Each word painted a life as raw and untamed as the rugged landscapes he came from. A life Eleanor had only glimpsed through newspaper stories or novels she had read by candlelight. Despite the danger, despite the blood and the chaos, Eleanor felt an undeniable pull toward him. She saw not only a man marked by hardship, but a force of nature, untamed yet disciplined, wild yet honorable. She wanted to know more about the man, about the world he had come from, and about the strange sense of destiny she felt in that very room. The first night passed in a tense rhythm of stolen glances, whispered cautions, and the soft crackle of the fire. Eleanor, usually composed and deliberate, found herself trembling not with fear alone, but with anticipation. When she glanced at Nantan, she saw the same awareness reflected in his stormy eyes, a mutual recognition that something had shifted in both their lives. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the library, illuminating dust motes in the golden haze. Eleanor prepared a simple breakfast spread, cheese, and hot coffee, taking care to avoid startling him. Nantan ate with a deliberate calm, his hands steady despite the remnants of yesterday's wound. For a moment, the room felt less like a stage for danger and more like a fragile sanctuary, where two disparate worlds had collided and held a tenuous peace. As they sat across from one another, Eleanor realized she was studying him more intently than she had ever studied a guest, a friend, or even a suitor. His features were sharp, his jawline strong, yet softened by expressions of quiet intensity. The long black hair, the beads and feather, the leather coat all seemed to tell stories without words, a history that demanded respect. "I've lived my life carefully," Eleanor admitted suddenly, almost to herself. "Polite gatherings, proper behavior, wealth. And yet I've never faced anything like this." Nantan's gaze softened, the storm in his eyes momentarily stilled. "Careful lives are often blind to the storms that wait outside their walls," he said. They spoke little more of the past that day. Instead, they observed each other with a mixture of caution, curiosity, and a growing sense of understanding. Every movement, every glance, seemed loaded with unspoken questions. "Can I trust you? Will you survive?" Can two worlds, so starkly different, ever coexist without tearing each other apart? By evening, Eleanor realized she could no longer imagine her life returning to its previous monotony. The tension of danger, the mystery of Nantan's arrival, and the depth of his presence had carved a permanent mark on her. He, too, seemed changed, as if the walls of wealth and propriety surrounding her had exposed a part of him he had long kept hidden. As night fell over Silver Creek, the mansion sat silent beneath a velvet sky dusted with stars. Eleanor and Nantan, bound by necessity, trust, and a spark neither could yet name, shared a quiet moment in the library, the firelight casting dancing shadows across their faces. Outside, the world seemed distant, its dangers momentarily suspended. Inside, a new, uncharted life had begun, one that promised danger, adventure, and perhaps, if fate was kind, something far more profound, love. For Eleanor Whitmore, the days of controlled elegance, polished manners, and carefully maintained distance were over. The moment Nantan entered her life, everything changed. Her heart raced with a mix of fear and exhilaration, a pulse that matched the rhythm of the unknown adventure that had already begun. And for Nantan, the rich lady who had defied his warnings and touched his wound with trembling hands became a tether, a fragile yet unyielding connection to a world he had long considered irretrievably lost. In the mist of Silver Creek, beneath the shadows of wealth and tradition, a bond was forged that neither time, prejudice, nor danger could easily break. The first chapter of their story had begun not with a ball or a carriage ride, but with shattered glass, blood, and a shared glance that spoke of survival, respect, and an unexpected, undeniable spark. Snow fell early that winter, thick and unrelenting, coating the hills around Silver Creek in a soft white blanket that muffled the usual sounds of the town. The mansion, Eleanor's pride and sanctuary, seemed fragile beneath the weight of the storm. Even the grandest walls could not shield her from the way her heart had been altered since Nantan's arrival. He had recovered enough to move, though the wound on his arm still needed careful attention. She insisted he remain inside, arguing that the treacherous roads and biting wind would only worsen his injury. Nantan had initially resisted, insisting he could travel, but Eleanor's persistence won over. She would not let him leave until he was stronger. Days blurred into nights, the mansion silent except for the crackle of the fireplace and the occasional howl of wind against the shutters. Eleanor found herself studying Nantan as he moved about the library, arranging splints and tending to his arm with meticulous care. Each motion seemed deliberate, almost ritualistic. His hands, though calloused and scarred, moved with surprising gentleness when handling delicate objects. She realized that this man, so capable in battle and survival, possessed a sensitivity that no one in Silver Creek's high society would ever imagine. Their conversations began cautiously. Eleanor spoke of her father, of her childhood in the Whitmore estate, of the endless expectations of propriety and perfection. Nantan, in turn, offered glimpses of his own past, fragments of Apache lands and people, and battles fought not only with men but with circumstance itself. The more Eleanor listened, the more she understood how impossible his world seemed to hers, yet how integral it had become to her curiosity and fascination. One evening, Eleanor found Nantan standing by the window, watching the snow swirl and settle on the manicured gardens. His long coat flared slightly as he moved, beads catching the light from the fire, his eagle feather tilted at a jaunty angle. For a moment, she simply watched him, captivated by the way he seemed both part of this world and utterly apart from it. "You shouldn't stay cooped up in here," she said softly, breaking the silence. "I've never stayed in one place." "Eleanor," Nantan replied, his voice carrying a quiet weight, "the wind has always been my guide, yet here I am grounded. Against my will." There was a momentary pause, heavy with unsaid words. Eleanor felt a flutter of emotion she could not name. Admiration, fear, and something far deeper she tried to suppress. "I suppose even the wind sometimes needs shelter," she said, almost to herself. Nantan's gaze softened for a fraction of a heartbeat, and then the intensity returned, sharp and wary. They had both come a long way from the initial tension of their first encounter, yet the walls each had built remained strong. Eleanor, despite her wealth and confidence in most matters, felt the unfamiliar pull of uncertainty and desire when she looked at him. Late that night, a knock at the front door shattered the fragile calm. Eleanor's heart leapt into her throat. She recognized immediately that it was not a social call. Nantan stiffened, muscles coiling like a spring ready to release. Eleanor could see the battle-honed reflexes beneath the surface of his calm exterior. "They've found me," he muttered, eyes darkening. "Stay inside. Lock the doors. Do not intervene." "I will not hide," Eleanor said firmly. "If danger comes here, I will face it. I cannot simply stand aside." He regarded her, stormy eyes assessing the depth of her courage. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. "Very well, but stay behind me." The first figure burst through the snow and into the hall, a gun raised, face masked with anger and intent. Eleanor froze for a heartbeat, then instinct took over. Nantan moved like a shadow, swift and precise. He deflected the gun with a quick strike to the arm, twisting the man to the ground. Eleanor's breath caught, heart hammering as she watched him. Realizing the sheer force and skill in every motion, the room became a blur of movement. The sound of boots against the polished floor, the crash of furniture, the occasional gunshot echoing in the storm outside. Eleanor ducked instinctively, but she could not tear her eyes from Nantan. Every attack he fended off revealed not just his strength, but his strategic mind. He was fluid, graceful, and terrifying in his capability. And yet, there was a constant thread of protection his every move shielded her. Even as the chaos unfolded around them, after what felt like an eternity, the attackers retreated into the snowstorm, their shouts swallowed by the wind. Eleanor and Nantan stood in the wrecked hallway, chests heaving, faces flushed, sweat and snow mingling on their skin. The danger had passed, at least for the moment, leaving a silence that was almost deafening. Eleanor's hand shook as she brushed a strand of hair from her face, turning to look at him. "You saved my life," she whispered, voice barely audible over the wind howling outside. "And you saved mine," Nantan replied, his tone softer, almost vulnerable. "But beware, Eleanor. Life is rarely kind to those who fall for each other in storms." The tension between them, once raw with fear and suspicion, now had a different charge, electric, undeniable. Eleanor took a hesitant step forward, then another, until her hand brushed against his. His eyes widened for a moment, and then, almost instinctively, he covered her hand with his own. The warmth of his skin, the steadiness beneath the long calloused fingers, sent a jolt through her that neither snow nor storm could diminish. Over the following days, the storm continued to rage, and the mansion became a sanctuary as much as a prison. Eleanor and Nantan learned to move in tandem, understanding each other's movements and unspoken cues. Their bond deepened, not through grand declarations, but through the quiet intimacy of shared survival, tending wounds, breaking fast with simple meals, and sitting by the fire while the snow pressed against the windows. Eleanor discovered resilience she had never known. She navigated the slippery paths, fetched supplies, and even tried her hand at basic survival skills under Nantan's guidance. He, in turn, revealed facets of himself she could not have anticipated: patience, humor, and an appreciation for beauty in the small things, a perfectly arranged fire, the way light fell across snow-covered hills, the rhythm of footsteps in fresh powder. One evening, as they sat together in the study, the storm outside casting patterns of shadows across the walls, Eleanor dared to ask the question that had haunted her since his arrival. "Nantan, why me? Why did you come here, of all places?" His gaze drifted toward the window, eyes dark pools of thought. "I did not choose you," he said finally, voice low. "I chose survival, but fate has a sense of humor. It brings people together in the strangest of ways. You were here. You chose to act, and now I cannot deny what that has stirred." Eleanor felt her breath catch. The firelight seemed to flicker in agreement with the racing of her heart. She wanted to speak, to tell him she felt the same, but words failed her. Instead, she reached for a blanket and draped it over his shoulders, the contact deliberate and tender. He accepted it, eyes meeting hers with a stormy intensity that left her trembling in both fear and anticipation. The wind shifted, snow slowing to a soft drizzle, revealing glimpses of the frozen landscape beyond. Eleanor realized that in those frozen weeks, something irreversible had changed. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth and safety, had become the backdrop to a growing, complex relationship. They were no longer simply protector and guest. Host and survivor, they were partners in a delicate dance of trust, courage, and emotions neither had anticipated. One night, as they both sat by the fire, Eleanor finally spoke aloud what had been building between them. "I never thought I could care for someone like you." Someone so different from everything I've known. But I do, I think. I do. Nantan reached for her hand again, this time holding it firmly, unflinchingly. And I, Eleanor, have not felt this in years, if ever. You are brave, fierce, and somehow, even in this chaos, you have found a place in my heart. The words, simple yet laden with weight, hung in the room as the firelight flickered. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside, the storm had taken a different form, one of emotion, intimacy, and a connection forged not only through danger, but through the quiet courage of two souls, recognizing one another across the chasms of their worlds. By the time the first light of dawn touched the frozen hills, Eleanor understood that her life had been forever altered. The mansion, the wealth, the expectations, all of it was now secondary to the living, breathing reality beside her. Nantan, too, seemed transformed, grounded in a way he had never been, tied to someone who had chosen to see him not as a danger, a story, or a stranger, but as a man worthy of trust and love. And so, in the quiet aftermath of snow and storm, Eleanor and Nantan sat together, hands entwined, hearts racing, knowing that whatever came next, whatever dangers, adventures, or choices would be faced together. For in the storm of Silver Creek, they had found not only survival but the fragile, exhilarating beginnings of a love neither had expected, yet both could no longer deny. Spring arrived slowly in Silver Creek, carrying with it the first hints of thaw and the soft scent of wildflowers pressed between melting snow and earth. Eleanor, who had grown accustomed to the stormy weeks with Nantan, now felt a restless energy that neither the mansion nor her wealth could contain. The days of quiet observation and cautious care were over. She wanted to move, to breathe air unfiltered by high ceilings and velvet curtains, to step into the wildness that Nantan embodied so effortlessly. "I cannot remain idle any longer," Eleanor told him one morning, brushing the tangles from her chestnut hair. "You speak of a place, a valley, somewhere the world cannot touch us. I want to see it." Nantan's eyes darkened, stormy gray meeting hers with a mixture of caution and surprise. "The hidden valley is not a place for the careless," he said. "Few who enter return unchanged. It will test you physically, mentally, and in ways your sheltered life has never prepared you for." Eleanor did not flinch. "I have endured storms in this house. I can endure more." After a long pause, Nantan nodded, a reluctant acknowledgment that he had underestimated her resolve. "Very well. We leave at first light." The journey was grueling, a harsh immersion into a landscape Eleanor had only glimpsed in books. Forests stretched into shadowed distances, ancient pines groaning under the weight of melting snow. Rivers roared with cold, turbulent water, forcing careful crossings over slippery stones. The air smelled of damp earth, pine resin, and the subtle tang of danger. Eleanor, dressed in practical riding clothes and boots instead of her silks, discovered muscles she had never known she possessed. She climbed cliffs, waded through streams, and learned to trust Nantan's guidance implicitly. Along the way, their conversations deepened. Eleanor spoke not only of her upbringing but of her fears, of the loneliness that had always accompanied her wealth. Nantan, in return, spoke of Apache traditions, of the way the wind guided him, of lessons passed down by elders about survival and honor. They laughed sometimes, a rare, bright sound echoing through the forests. And sometimes they sat in silence, listening to the rhythm of the wild, the quiet intimacy of shared space binding them ever closer. One afternoon, after a particularly treacherous climb up a narrow ridge, they came upon a plateau overlooking a valley so secluded it felt untouched by time. Waterfalls tumbled into pools of crystal clarity, Wildflowers stretched in vibrant carpets across the meadows, and deer grazed along the edges of the trees, unafraid. Eleanor gasped, breath caught in her throat. This is it," Nantan said softly, almost reverently. "The hidden valley. Few have ever seen it." Eleanor stepped forward, feeling the wind against her face, the sun warming her cheeks. It was as if the world had been stripped of its rules, of its judgments, leaving only raw beauty and freedom. She turned to Nantan, who watched her with the intensity of someone seeing the world through a lens of survival and respect. "It's magnificent," she whispered, her voice trembling. "And you? You belong here in a way I could never understand." Nantan shook his head, but a small smile tugged at his lips. "I belong nowhere completely, but here. I am safe enough, for now." Days in the valley passed in a rhythm dictated by nature. Eleanor learned to hunt small game, to forage for edible plants, to build fires that resisted wind and rain. Nantan taught her to move silently, to anticipate the sounds of animals and humans alike, to respect the land and all it offered. In turn, Eleanor brought curiosity and ingenuity, her city-born skills proving surprisingly useful in improvising traps or mapping safe routes. They complemented each other, two worlds intertwined, forming a bond both practical and profoundly intimate. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks and painted the valley in amber and violet, Eleanor and Nantan sat by a river that snaked through the meadows. The water was cold and clear, reflecting the sky in fractured shards. Eleanor had gathered herbs for a poultice to treat a minor cut on his leg, and as she worked, Nantan's gaze lingered on her. "You have changed since the snowstorm," he said quietly. "You are stronger, braver, and yet more yourself than ever." Eleanor smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. "And you? You've allowed me to see you beyond the danger, beyond the warrior. I didn't think someone like you would let anyone in." Nantan's jaw tightened slightly, a hint of vulnerability slipping through his stoic exterior. "Few have the courage to see me as I am. Most fear or judge. You choose differently. It is why I trust you." The air between them shifted, a tension that had always lurked beneath the surface now tangible. Eleanor hesitated, then let her hand brush against his. Nantan did not pull away. The contact was electric, charged with months of shared danger, trust, and the thrill of the unknown. For the first time, the walls they had built fear, pride, caution seemed to dissolve, leaving only the undeniable pull of attraction and connection. But peace, as it always did in their lives, was fragile. One afternoon, Eleanor noticed footprints near the riverbank, human, not animal. They were careful, deliberate, and too large for any wild creature. Her heart tightened. She had learned enough from Nantan to recognize the signs. Someone or more than one had entered the valley. "They found us," she said, tension sharpening her voice. Nantan's expression hardened, eyes scanning the tree line. "Stay behind me. No misstep." The intruders emerged from the trees, a small group of men with rough features and the air of those accustomed to violence. Their guns glinted in the sunlight, and their stance betrayed a mix of arrogance and urgency. Eleanor's breath caught, but she remained steadfast. Nantan's hand brushed hers briefly, a silent reassurance. The confrontation was immediate and brutal. Nantan moved with the precision of a seasoned fighter, deflecting attacks, disarming, striking with calculated force. Eleanor, though inexperienced, held her ground, using lessons he had taught her, sidestepping, ducking, creating diversions. The valley became a stage for their skill, trust, and the raw intensity of survival. As the fight raged, Eleanor noticed a change in herself. The fear that had gripped her in the mansion was still present, but now it was tempered by determination. She could move, think, and act. She could protect herself and the man she had come to care for more than she could admit. Finally, the attackers were driven back into the forest, cursing and bleeding, forced to retreat. Eleanor and Nantan stood together, bodies tense, chests heaving, adrenaline coursing through every vein. The valley, once serene, now carried the scent of earth, blood, and smoke. Eleanor lowered her gaze, trying to calm her racing heart. We survived," she whispered, voice barely audible. Nantan's hand found hers again, holding it firmly, grounding her. "And we did it together," he said. "You are stronger than you believe, Eleanor." "Stronger than I expected." Her cheeks flushed, both from exertion and the intimacy of the moment. She realized how deeply she had come to rely on him, not just for protection, but for understanding, guidance, and the strange sense of belonging she felt in his presence. The sun dipped behind the peaks, casting long shadows across the valley. Eleanor and Nantan sat by the river, the water reflecting the fiery colors of dusk. Their hands remained intertwined, neither speaking, both content to exist in the silence that followed the storm. "You've changed my life," Eleanor said finally, voice soft but certain. Nantan's gaze held hers, stormy and intense, yet softened by an emotion she could not name at first. "And you've changed mine," he replied. "You've shown me that the world can hold more than survival, that it can hold connection, trust, and perhaps even love." The word hung between them, delicate and fragile, yet undeniable. Eleanor felt her pulse quicken, the realization settling like sunlight breaking through clouds. Love had entered their lives, not sudden, not naive, but forged in danger, trust, and the relentless beauty of the hidden valley dot as night fell. The valley seemed to exhale a calm that Eleanor had not felt in months. Stars pierced the sky, their light dancing across the water's surface. Eleanor leaned her head against Nantan's shoulder, finding comfort in the rhythm of his breathing. For the first time, she felt at peace, knowing that whatever challenges awaited, they would face them together in the hidden valley. Amidst the wild, untamed beauty and lingering shadows of danger, Eleanor and Nantan discovered a truth neither had anticipated, that love, like survival, required courage, patience, and trust. And in that discovery, they found a bond strong enough to endure storms, snow, and the relentless unpredictability of the world beyond. Summer came to Silver Creek with a heat that pressed down on the valley, turning the stream sluggish and the forest into a haze of shimmering green. Eleanor and Nantan had grown accustomed to the rhythm of the hidden valley, to the quiet intimacy and the freedom it provided. Yet the shadow of the past, the threats that had haunted them through snow and stone, still lingered like a storm cloud on the horizon. Nantan's enemies were persistent, and Eleanor knew that their sanctuary would not remain untouched forever. One morning, as they prepared to scout the outer ridges of the valley, Eleanor turned to him, determination in her chest. "We cannot wait for them to come to us. We must act. We can use the valley and our knowledge of it to our advantage." Nantan studied her, stormy gray eyes narrowing in thought. "You wish to lure them here? That is risky. They are numerous and desperate. If they discover a mistake—" His words trailed, unsaid threats hanging in the air. "I know the risks," Eleanor replied, voice steady. "But I have the resources, and you have the skill. Together, we can turn the tables." He regarded her for a long moment, reading her resolve, measuring the fire in her eyes. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. We prepare." For days they moved silently through the valley, setting traps, marking escape routes, and practicing signals. Eleanor, who had once only known the controlled environment of her mansion, now relished the strategy, the tactical thinking, and the adrenaline that accompanied it. Nantan guided her with patience and trust, teaching her to anticipate danger, to read the movements of men and animals alike, to understand the terrain as if it were part of her own body. When the first signs of the pursuers appeared, footprints pressed deep into the softened soil. Broken branches marking hurried passage. Eleanor's pulse quickened. They had arrived. She and Nantan exchanged a glance, unspoken communication passing between them. Every skill, every lesson, every moment of trust was about to be tested. The confrontation began at dusk. The valley was bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, shadows stretching across the meadows and cliffs. Eleanor and Nantan took positions among the rocks, using the terrain as cover. Eleanor's heart pounded, not with fear, but with the thrill of action and the knowledge that she and Nantan were equal partners in this fight. When the first men entered the clearing, Nantan moved like a phantom. He struck with precision, disarming and disabling with swift, calculated force. Eleanor, beside him, took up a rifle they had hidden, firing not recklessly but with careful intent, forcing the attackers to hesitate and scatter. Their coordination was seamless. Months of survival, practice, and trust had honed them into a unit that no outsider could break. Despite the chaos, Eleanor remained focused. She observed, anticipated, and acted with a clarity she had never possessed in her former life of silk gowns and social engagements. Each movement she made complemented Nantan's, and together they drove the attackers into the traps and hidden routes they had prepared. The battle was intense but brief, a flurry of motion, shouts, and gunfire that ended with the remaining men retreating into the hills. Defeated or bound by ropes, they had skillfully set down as the dust settled and the sun finally dipped below the horizon. Eleanor and Nantan emerged from the shadows, bruised and exhausted, yet victorious. The valley was silent once more, the danger dissolved into the cooling evening air. Eleanor exhaled, the weight of tension leaving her body, replaced by a profound sense of accomplishment. Nantan approached her, eyes dark and intense, and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have proven yourself beyond anything I imagined. You are no longer merely a guest in this world. You are part of it, part of me." Eleanor's heart thumped, the significance of his words washing over her. "And you? You have changed me as well. I am not the same woman who watched you fall through my library window months ago. I have learned, endured, and survived by your side, and I care for you more than I can ever say." For a long moment, they stood in the cooling twilight, the valley around them a sanctuary of wildflowers, cliffs, and flowing rivers. Nantan's hand found hers, fingers intertwining in a grip that was both protective and tender. Their faces were close, breaths mingling in the warm evening air. Eleanor felt the pull of inevitability, the magnetic force that had drawn them together through storms, snow, and hidden valleys. "You have taken a risk coming here," Nantan said softly, his voice carrying the weight of months of trials and shared danger. "But I would not have it any other way. You have shown me trust, courage, and something I thought I would never feel again." "And I," Eleanor whispered, her eyes locking with his, "have discovered that life is worth more when shared. With you, with someone who sees me not as a lady to be protected, but as an equal to fight alongside." Their lips met then, tentative at first, and then with growing certainty. The kiss was not just desire, it was affirmation, release, and the acknowledgement of a bond forged in the fire of trials and danger. Eleanor felt a shiver run through her, a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration, as if every storm, every snowfall, every battle had led to this singular, perfect moment. Night fell completely, stars blazing across the sky, and they remained together by the riverbank, hands still intertwined, speaking little, understanding much. Eleanor leaned her head against Nantan's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his body against hers. In that moment, the world beyond the valley Silver Creek, her wealth, the expectations, and the lingering threats faded to irrelevance. Days later, they walked together through the valley, gathering wild herbs and tending to the traps they had set. The rhythm of the valley, the natural beauty, and the shared trust had become a sanctuary for both. Eleanor realized that her love for Nantan was no fleeting fancy, it was deep, resilient, and as untamed as the land they now called their own. Nantan, for his part, had never let himself feel such attachment before. Eleanor had changed that. She had shown him that strength could coexist with tenderness, that love could exist alongside survival. As summer deepened, the valley became more than just a refuge. Eleanor and Nantan built small shelters, cleared paths, and explored hidden groves. Each day was an adventure, each night a reaffirmation of the bond they had forged. They laughed, they argued, and they learned each other's rhythms with an intimacy that neither had anticipated but both cherished. Eventually, Eleanor knew it was time to return to Silver Creek, not to surrender to her former life, but to claim it on her own terms. She and Nantan rode together, side by side, back through the forests and hills. Aware that they were no longer simply Eleanor and Nantan, they were a team. Partners in life and in love. When the mansion finally appeared, Eleanor felt a surge of emotion. Everything had changed. She would never return to the timid, sheltered life she had known. She would never forget the snowstorm, the hidden valley, or the danger that had brought her and Nantan together. And most importantly, she would never deny the love that had grown. Untamed and fierce, between them, Nantan dismounted beside her, looking up at the mansion with a mixture of acknowledgement and distaste for the world it represented. "Are you ready?" he asked. Eleanor took his hand, squeezing it tightly. "I am. And I am ready for everything society threats the world. As long as we face it together." He nodded, stormy eyes softened by a rare, unguarded smile. "Then let us face it together. No more hiding, no more running. We define our own path." The final confrontation had passed, the valley remained their secret, and Silver Creek awaited them, but Eleanor and Nantan had changed irrevocably. They entered the mansion not as frightened or cautious participants in the world of wealth and propriety, but as a unit forged through trials, survival, and unwavering trust. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor negotiated her place in Silver Creek with confidence and authority. Nantan, though a stranger to the town's norms, became an unexpected figure of respect, his presence undeniable, his skills and intelligence evident to all who encountered him. Together they faced lingering threats, diffused rivalries, and protected the valley that had given them life and love. One evening, as the sun dipped low over Silver Creek, Eleanor and Nantan sat together on the porch, hands entwined, watching the golden light fade into night. Eleanor turned to him, a playful smile on her lips, recalling their first encounter in the library months ago. "Do you remember when I told you, 'How dare you touch me?'" Nantan chuckled softly, his stormy eyes meeting hers. "I do, and yet, here we are. I touched you, and you let me. You saved me, and I could not leave you. It seems fate has a sense of humor indeed." Eleanor leaned against him, feeling the steady strength of his body, the warmth of his presence, and the certainty of a love born through danger and tested in the wilderness. "And now," she whispered, "I would not have it any other way." Nantan brushed her hair from her face, tender and deliberate. "Neither would I. This is our world now. Together, always." As night fell over Silver Creek, Eleanor and Nantan sat quietly, listening to the world around them, hearts intertwined, the trials behind them and a future of love and freedom stretching ahead. For in the midst of danger, storms, and hidden valleys, They had found each other, and nothing, neither wealth nor prejudice, neither past nor future threats, could undo the bond they had forged.